her parents again in heaven, would I have helped her? I don't really know. According to Merriam-Webster.com, the definition for assisted suicide is suicide with help from another person, such as a doctor, to end suffering from severe physical illness. Now, there are many different names for assisted suicide, such as euthanasia, which is the more common name. Then there's physician-assisted suicide, doctor-assisted suicide, and a more loosely used term, which is mercy killing. Now, today, by showing you the facts and telling you the story of a doctor who assisted in helping people commit suicide, I hope to persuade you in that assisted suicide is wrong and should remain illegal. According to medicalnewstoday.com, there are different classifications for assisted suicide. The first is voluntary euthanasia. This is assisted suicide with consent. This means that the person gives full consent to be able for somebody to end their life. The second type is called involuntary euthanasia. This is assisted suicide without consent. That would mean if somebody was in a coma and they've been in a coma for years, and somebody else, like a husband or a wife, decided, oh, it's time, they can go now, then that would be involuntary. Another classification is called passive euthanasia. This means that life-sustaining treatments are withheld from the patient, such as if my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer like she was, but she wasn't able to do chemo if the doctor just never gave it to her. A fourth is called active euthanasia. This involves using lethal substances or forces used to end the patient's life. Now, this is Dr. Jack Kevorkian and one of his inventions called the Thanatron. Dr. Kevorkian was a United States doctor who assisted people in committing suicide. He said that people had the right to die. He created this machine called the Thanatron, which is Greek for instrument for death. The Thanatron consisted of 3 bottles which delivered successive doses of fluids. The first was a saline solution, the second was filled with a painkiller, and then the third was a fatal dose of the poison potassium chloride. Using this machine allowed people to actually administer the lethal dose of poison themselves. In 1990, Dr. Kevorkian assisted in the suicide of Janet Atkins, a 54-year-old Alzheimer's patient from Michigan. She was a member of a society called the Hemlock Society, an organization that advocates voluntary assisted suicide for terminally ill patients. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she began her search for somebody to help her to end it before this disease took over her life and to where she wasn't herself anymore. She contacted Dr. Kevorkian, and he agreed to help her end her life in a public park in his van. Kevorkian attached the IV to Janet, and then she administered her own painkiller and then the poison. She was dead within 5 minutes. Now, the state of Michigan immediately charged him for her murder, but the case was dismissed due to Michigan's indecisive stance on assisted suicide. Over the next few years, Kevorkian was prosecuted a total of 4 times in Michigan. The first 3 were acquitted, and a mistrial was declared for the 4th. On March 26, 1999, Kevorkian was convicted of second-degree murder of the illegal delivery of a controlled substance. He was sentenced to 25 years, but was released after 8 for good behavior. Dr. Kevorkian was known as Dr. Death, and he is said to have helped over 130 people commit suicide. Now, in the United States, 4 states have made assisted suicide legal, while the rest remain illegal. These 4 states are Montana, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington State. Now, according to CNN, Oregon has had 752 assisted suicide deaths in the last 3 years. Vermont has only only had 2, and Washington State has had 525. Now in Tennessee, assisted suicide is considered a Class D felony, which this means that the crime is punishable from anywhere from 2 to 12 years in prison and a fine for up to $5,000. To me, if I knew somebody who had help for somebody to kill themselves, $5,000 really isn't worth helping them in their life. At least to me, it's not. In conclusion, so now you've heard the facts, you know what the law says, and what assisted suicide actually means. Exodus 21:14 says, "But if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death." To help somebody kill themselves is killing them. It's not them just doing it, you're helping them. Now I take you back to my initial question. If your loved one asked you to help them end their life, to make the pain go away, would you do it? I hope the answer would be